expected to happen. Maritime Workers Union had threatened to down tools today. So we'll come to that in just a moment. But Dr. Okupe, yes, he put up that statement yesterday, but how about listening to him directly in terms of why he did what he did?
Dr. Doyin Okupe, I resigned from the party yesterday.
Dr. Doyin Okupe, former Director General of the Obidati Campaign Organization, quits the Labour Party on ideological grounds.
Okay, well, it should have been a longer version, so apologies on that one. He did say much more than that in terms of what happened, but we'll get all of that sorted to you as we proceed. But several other scenarios will play out much more today.
Indeed, I think that it will be very interesting to keep our eyes on the courts and to also... politics never leaves the stage, does it? But I think that the focus needs to be governance, and I think that that's why this... screening, or is it grilling, being done by the EFCC would also be very interesting to also monitor. Yesterday, we heard that Sadiya Farouk, who had served as Minister for the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry, reported to the EFCC. And even till late yesterday, it wasn't clear if she was able to go home after the grilling with the EFCC. We also saw the suspension of the Minister for Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation. But Doyin Okupe certainly will be making the news as well, because quite a formidable, let's say, campaign he was starting to lead when he had to leave as DG, just when he had that court case against him. I think that he was found guilty, even though the punishment seemed rather light, but it was something that the Labour Party couldn't have. He became sort of, I don't want to say an albatross of some sort, but he decided that, you know, to give the party a breath of fresh air and to also not burden them down with that particular case, he decided to resign. And we saw Mr. Osuntokun take over as the DG of the Labour Party. Ideological difference, you have to then ask, you know, what precisely is the ideology? And since when did our parties become really ideological based? But hey, there's always a start to something. And if you find that you're not really fitting in, why not? The honorable thing to do will be to resign and say, you know, I don't think I fit in here. So quite an interesting start to the year. Maybe it's part of his New Year resolution to assess how he's done in the past year and say what exactly is working, what isn't working. It might be a good example for all of us to follow, you know, not resign. That's not what I mean. I mean in terms of taking stock of what exactly is working in one's life, what isn't working, and to say, am I really on the path that I really want to follow by myself? And if it isn't working for you, or if it's working, do more of it. If it isn't working, you say, no, maybe this is not where I should be, you know, concentrating my energies on. And maybe that's what he's done. But as you have highlighted there, as we've highlighted there, it'll be very interesting to hear from him in greater detail. I mean, he always makes a very interesting interviewee. When you speak with him, you will always leave with a sound bite. I certainly can tell you that one. So it'll be interesting to keep tabs on him in the coming days. Ayo.
Well, yeah, you know, the part of his statement that caught me, you know, that really interested me is the part where he said the party was only used as a special purpose vehicle, SPV, for the presidential ambition of Mr. Obi during the last presidential election. And that term just resonated in a number of ways. I'm going to leave you to your imagination about special purpose vehicles. Well, you know, is there anyone at some point, Chamberlain Malkwe, that made a New Year resolution for Nigeria? Because it seems like we're starting the year with a deluge of restructuring, if I can say that, in governance. So on the one hand, of course, we've just heard that Dr. Doyin Okupe left his party. On the other hand is that, you know, news making the rounds of Dr. Betta Edu being suspended from office, and the EFCC doing some searchings around 3 different persons. And then add that to the fact that just yesterday we received news that, so let me just read the statement. from the presidency that two individuals, the EVC, Executive Vice Chairman and CEO of FCCPC, Mr. Babatunde Irukera, and Mr. Alexander Ayola Oko, Director General and CEO of the Bureau of Public Enterprises, have also been removed from office. And according to that statement, the two dismissed chief executives are directed to hand over to the next most senior officer in their respective agencies, pending the appointment of new chief executive officers. By this directive of the president, their removal from office takes immediate effect. So are we going to be having questions around that, or is just one of those things? Because the reason given by the presidency is a part of plans to restructure and reposition critical agencies of the federal government towards protecting the rights of Nigerian consumers and providing a strong basis for enhanced contributions to the nation's economy. So there you have it. Those have happened. Are we expecting more, particularly, Chamberlain, from what you said about the courts?
Well. I tell you, there's just so much. It's happening real thick and fast. And so we'll do what we can to bring all of that to you as we progress. So here now is Dr. Okukwe speaking on why he left the party.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Doyin Okukwe. I resigned from the party yesterday, but I have no grounds or guide towards anyone. It is purely and solely on ideological basis. I've been in politics for over 40 years, and my political lineage or leaning and pedigree is towards free enterprise and liberal democracy. We did, in fact, go into Labour Party just as a special purpose vehicle, so that our presidential candidate, our flag bearer, His Excellency Mr. Peter Obi, could find a platform on which to contest the elections. We had hoped that if we won, we would have had to sit down with the Labour leaders and find a common position, because neither of us is a Labour person or a leftist. But it was expedient for us at that time to find a platform, and we did find one. And I have been particularly very respectfully treated. I've enjoyed my stay in Labour Party, but because of these ideological differences, I had to resign. But I wish the party well, and I also wish my principal, His Excellency Mr. Peter Obi, every success in his future endeavor.
So the beat goes on, as you heard Dr. Okukwe say right there. He's got to do what he's got to do moving forward. But of course, Labour Party is not a full stop. So they themselves will also keep the party ticking, I reckon. But look, way early, well, at least from where we stand here, it was only yesterday some parties, some papers are talking about, what, 2020, I don't want to talk about that year, but let's focus on what we have on hand first. So they could sort themselves out as they progress, but we've got the business of development and life to live before that time comes on. So all of those who are in offices, we all have to hold them accountable. So we'll be back with you to take you through some of the dailies in a moment. Welcome back. Let's run you through some of the dailies. And so let's do it this way. Now, look at Daily Trust, for instance. Bandits return to Kaduna-Abuja Highway, abduct 30, block road for 45 minutes. Wow, somebody was keeping tabs on that one, guys.
And the next paper up now is Leadership newspapers. Leadership has on their front page, you can see there, humanitarian sleaze. EFCC quizzes Sadia, invites better edu. They also have a number of riders. Ministers suspended to allow transparent probe. That's according to agency. Edu spotted at Aso Villa. Interior Minister distances self from humanitarian ministry contract. So that's the front page of Leadership this morning.
Story on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper is the same as that of the Leadership newspaper, only a different tilt to it. 585 million naira graft, suspended Betta Edu, denied access to Tinubu. Stories on page 5. Humanitarian Affairs Minister to APEB for EFCC today. Ex-Minister Shadia Umar Farouk sleeps in EFCC cell over 44 billion naira scam. We're leaving no stone unturned in fishing out culprits, EFCC vows. Uzodinma Ndume, CSO's action aid. I'm not a signatory to company linked to Betta Edu. That's according to the Interior Minister. Find out the details of that on page 5.
We'll take a look at The Guardian next. 585 million humanitarian scandal. EFCC quizzes embattled Edu, others as anti-graft opera heightens. And then you also get to see subscribers suffer service disruption over 70 billion naira interconnect debts. That's The Guardian.
New Telegraph also follows suit, everyone focusing on that quizzing. 585 million naira scandal. Suspended Betta Edu, denied access to Tinubu, told to hand over to PAMSEC, may face EFCC interrogators today. President demands detail of financial architecture, framework of social investment programs. Uzodinma backs decision to suspend minister. That's what New Telegraph has on its front page.
This Nigeria newspaper has a different tilt to it, both in its caption and in the choice of picture. Take a look at it. This Nigeria newspaper, you better step aside. And very interesting. And the picture is like, what did I do? But look at the riders. Tinubu suspends Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation Minister over 585 million naira scandal. Edu denied access to President in Aso Villa. EFCC quizzes embattled minister today. Ndume, Sheikh Hussaini, others hail suspension. The details you'll find on pages 4, 5, and 7 of This Nigeria Today.
How about the Nigerian Observer? Yes, they equally observe the 585 billion naira scandal, but beneath that story, you get to see it's illegal for states to control Nigeria's inland waterways, impose levies. Supreme Court. Wow. Just wow. But that's a law now.
Indeed. I'm wondering, do we still have more? I think is that Business Day?
No, that's the Observer.
Okay, I think I was just looking for what Business Day has on its front page this morning. Okay, yes, you can see it right there. Business Day. Foreign investors exit from Nigerian stocks nears 3-year high. So they're also keeping tabs on the Nigerian stock market. Interestingly, the bulls are still having their way at the stock market. So even if investors are leaving and somehow the bulls are still having the day, I think it says a lot about the resilience of the Nigerian stock market, and quite a lot to continue to look at right there, especially as we enter the new year.
Okay, so, guys, some of the things that did catch my attention. For instance, on the front page of The Guardian here today, it was tucked in right there on the side where the members of the House of Reps were blaming the Ministry of Agriculture for at least delay in sharing Tinubu's palliatives, as it were, because remember, several citizens have been asking questions concerning that one. So, incidentally, we had the Minister of State for Agriculture yesterday, so that this didn't come up. We didn't see this. It only just came through now that there's that bureaucratic bottleneck. But importantly, we also did say that they needed to speak up. We called for that they should speak up about what is happening. If the constituents had been at least promised certain things through their members, they need to speak up. But now that they have said this one, blaming Agri-Ministry for probably the bureaucratic bottleneck, but Agri-Ministry in turn also need to clear the air concerning this. Is this the case? Are you the one responsible for Nigerians not getting palliatives? But the question then is, if they are citing delay or bottlenecks from the ministry, what about those senators, those members, House of Reps members that you saw distributing them? Where did it come from?
Yeah.
Were some faster than others?
It's a big story, because I know that some of the members were saying, oh, it's because those states have elections coming up. So is it that there's been focused
so they're playing
on
politics.
the states? Exactly. Are they playing politics with it? Because the idea is that, this is representative of Nigeria. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, we have members from the APC, PDP, Labour Party, and everybody is supposed to be able to get something to their constituency. So if at the end of the day, I want to imagine that members are not going to be distributing it through their party offices, but that's another thing. Are they going to be doing that? If they're doing that, they should not forget that it's not only party members vote when elections come. So a lot of people who are not within political parties, you'll be seeking their votes. And I want to imagine that those are the people that you will want to give this rice, the palliative, whatever form they're coming in. But I think that there needs to be a little more clarity on what exactly has happened. The members of the House of Reps need to have a more formal, let's say, engagement on that. By formal, maybe a press conference of sorts. And then, or maybe an engagement with the Ministry of Agriculture to find out what precisely is holding back, especially those members who are yet to receive their own bags of rice. Or beg your pardon, I don't know why I keep saying bags of rice. Palliatives. Because I'm just assuming that it's just bags of rice. It might be something else. Okay, I think that will be that for... let's take a look at what the Daily Trust led with. That story is very, very important, and I hope that all of the security officials involved in bringing safety to that road. It was just a few days ago, a colleague of ours, in fact, it was just yesterday, as a matter of fact, that this interview aired with the Director, looking for the right word, no, it's not Director General, Commandant-in-Chief, what do they use?
Or
NSCDC. Yes, Commandant General.
Commandant General? Yeah.
Commandant General of the NSCDC, and he was talking about how security has improved. And one of the places, interestingly, he cited was this Abuja-Kaduna highway, and he said it was difficult.
Dear.
So, yes, that was the example.
Were they listening to him?
Maybe, and that's the reason why you hear governors never wanting to brag about security, because 1 minute you say something and next minute it seems these people are working to ruin whatever success you say you've recorded.
Wow.
But look, this is what we're seeing on the front page of Daily Trust this morning. Very disturbing. Bandits return to Kaduna-Abuja highway, abduct 30. I hope that that's not something that we're going to be going into the year with, and this will just be a one-off. That will be the hope. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust.
Well, the question you want to ask, Maokwe, is did they ever really leave that place in the first place? Remember all of the rhetorics making the rounds at the time that some officials in the security agencies, I don't want to mention anyone so it doesn't sound like an indictment, saying that there was some kind of arrangement to ensure that at least there is peace in that environment. And don't also forget that we had these stories say that some people in those communities preferred those, outlaws, let me use that word, to protect them, because if they don't, they are doomed anyways. That's the way it came across, and of course, we had interviews, several, around that one. And it parts in the same light that I'm very particularly interested in this story talked on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper, which says that the members of CAN in Plateau State, CAN leads protests against continued killings in Plateau. It's one of the stories at the bottom left corner of the Vanguard newspaper this morning, and I find it very, very interesting. Another journalist, call it citizen journalist or whatever, went to that environment and made videos and said, what's all these things about? Look, just Google, insecurity in Plateau State, and you'll find out that Plateau State was a once peaceful state. We had this interview here, you guys, you will remember, with the governor in the wake of that attack on Plateau State, late last year. And the man was literally saying, look, these things are not new to us. We know that there are some communities, 64 communities in Plateau State that have been occupied, and he says he's going to see the president. Well, the CAN leaders, went ahead and they carried their own protest, and they were asking that the governor should go talk to the president on their behalf. According to them, the protesters, a situation where the military and other security agencies have failed to protect the people against terror attacks and at the same time would not allow the victims to defend themselves against the invasion of their communities is the height of injustice against the people. And of course, they are calling on the president to take drastic action to deal with the situation. This is not in any way, manner, shape, or form to disparage the intense work being done by all of our security agencies, the military, the police, the whoever you are, doing amazing work. Don't also forget that it was at some point one CDS, I think, that we spoke with here, talked about the role of politics in security or a lack of it in our country. Is this one of those issues? People cannot be left to their helplessness. The primary function of government is the security and welfare of the people. It's not just the law, it is the constitution. So now we are talking about Kaduna-Abuja Highway again. We're still talking about what's happening in Plateau State, and God forbid, where next? So without security, we may not be able to secure the investments that we are driving into the country. I'm sure that is something that the president is very well aware of. Let's just hope that everyone else around him and in government with him, particularly at the state level, are aware of these facts as well. So back to you guys.
The other story that caught my attention is on the front page of New Telegraph. Senators seem to be weighing in now. I think they're on recess at the moment, and so they're speaking from wherever they are. For instance, you see Kalu to Tinubu address insecurity, economy, electricity. And then Senator Ndume, on the far right, on the same breath, says, dismantle emerging political cartel. Ndume begs Tinubu, urges president to raise security agents' salaries, allowances. And you know, of course, we know how important it is to get it right with security. But there are several other questions which we will keep highlighting here, that we keep playing this ostrich. Yes, the former government also did talk about, I think there was some decision and directive to increase the salaries of policemen. Now, some policemen did say they hadn't seen it. I think at some point, eventually, some said they saw something, but we'll need to double check to see what kind of impact that had on policing. Because policing themselves, if you ask some of the military men behind the scenes, they'll tell you, look, some of the functions that the military carry out internally are policing jobs. So why is it that we haven't decided to do anything deliberate to make sure that we empower the police such that they can carry out those activities? Look, yes, you may talk about the ones you see on the streets, how they need to do a lot better. But what do you expect if you don't give them that kind of training? What do you expect if politicians keep letting their cronies go into all those places and hold those kind of positions and jobs? What do you expect if they see that you don't even respect them and accord them their pride of place in the society? What do you expect? Because it's garbage in, garbage out. If you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, as they say. So we need to ensure that we address that question. Do we want the policing structure or the security architecture to be reorganized? What is wrong in multi-layer, multi-level policing? Because it's one thing to mount it, and when we get into government, we don't put our money where our mouth is. So with this government, we're waiting to see. In fact, I think journalists, wherever they see them, should ask them, from the president downward, what is your stance on multi-level policing?
Very important question to ask, Chamberlain. As the last time we counted, the military was involved in about 27 states in internal operations in about 20, if not more than, up to 30 now. There are about 36 states in Nigeria. We have 36 states exactly, and the Federal Capital Territory. So if you have the military involved in internal operations in about 30 states, then it goes to tell you just what state of security we're in. A very, very important question to ask of ourselves as to what precisely we want to have of our police and also of our security architecture. But let's take a look at leadership again, and the story I'd like to highlight. I mean, while there's plenty of focus on what was happening at the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, this was quietly slipped in yesterday. Tinubu dismisses consumer protection and BPE boxes. So that was quietly excuse me, slipped in there. So Babatunde Irukera
I thought he was doing the job.
Exactly. So that's the impression a lot of people have, that the FCCPC, as they're called, I'm trying to remember their new abbreviation now, seem to have been doing a pretty good job. So when they said, oh, they were dismissed for, what did they say they were dismissed for now? They're dismissed in conformity with plans to restructure and reposition critical agencies of federal government. You now have to ask, has there been a proper assessment of these agencies properly? Because this FCCPC is now a self-accounting agency. In other words, they no longer draw monies from the treasury. They no longer draw. They are supposed
which is a standard.
Which is a standard, and they're supposed to be able to make money of their own and keep themselves going, which is something that they have now started. So it came as a surprise, as a rude shock of some sort, listening to that story on the news yesterday, that the president had dismissed the boss of the Consumer Protection. I'm not very familiar with who the boss of the BPE is and what their work has been since we have since handed over a number of government agencies to private hands. I know that there's a lot of that. The BPE was very prominent in the Obasanjo era. But the Consumer Protection, they've been pretty responsive, taking questions even on social media platforms and coming out with, very massive publicity to tell citizens about their rights. So it really came as a big shock yesterday.
So
but this was
whoever takes the seat now,
yes, has a standard.
You have a job cut out for you.
Exactly.
Whoever that is.
An expectation.
People will
from the
expect
people.
you to do much more than they have seen Mr. Rukara do.
Exactly.
Period.
Yeah. And I think that he certainly deserves the thanks of Nigerians.
Oh, yes.
He really did, he put his work, he put a lot of work into that agency.
And that's what we want. Any public
so
official who does good to Nigerians will thank them.
Indeed.
That's what they want.
Indeed. I didn't think I got it. Well, sometimes they say this work is a thankless job. So if he didn't
Are you a public official?
If he didn't get a thank you, I'm sure that he understands that his work can be a thankless job. But hey, I think on behalf of Nigerians, we can say thank you for your service, Mr. Erukera. Let's leave it there for the leadership newspapers.
I find it very interesting what you just said now, Maokwe, that look, if you are doing a good job, Nigerians will know. And those who feel it in particular. Allow me, guys, to go to the front page of the Nigerian Observer. Right above the nameplate is that very interesting story of surveillance cameras to become compulsory for businesses designated premises in Edo. Hopefully, that's, of course, the idea is to step up security. Look at the rider. Obaseki pushes to sustain gains recorded in tackling insecurity. That's it right there above the nameplate of the Nigerian Observer. Is there a way we can replicate this thing all over the place? Someone was talking the other day and he was saying, look, in certain parts of the world, in certain countries of the world, it is impossible to get away with certain things because there are cameras all over the place. And that will help to sustain the measure of security that we may have put up here and there. But there is usually some kind of skill to getting that done. Don't place this surveillance cameras in places where the people you are looking to catch will first of all go and pull them down before they commit the offense. But can we replicate this thing all over Nigeria? Can every state? I think Lagos State has done fairly well in that regard. Can we replicate the same thing for every area of the country? We know that there are some areas. Chimele, I'm wondering, Malkwe too, how will we replicate that kind of situation, for instance, in the areas so-called ungoverned spaces in certain parts of the north? Because this is where insecurity happened in those areas. Is that possible? It's just a brain, just something that trickled into my brain now, but this is definitely a good one. So yes, Malkwe, I'm with you on this one. When you're doing right, people should say, well done. But what do you think about that idea, guys?
Well, alternatively, you can be like the lizard. If nobody thanks you when you fall,
you nod your head.
Do it yourself.
I will praise myself.
But we had the FCT official here last time, and he also did say that in FCT it's actually compulsory to have CCTVs in your private premise and public premises, your offices, so that they are going to begin enforcement and see how they can ensure that happens. You're like, whoa,
is that
we
government
didn't know that.
derelicting their own duty? I mean, is this supposed to sit in? Is this supposed to replace what government is supposed to do, what government has been unable to do? now forcing businesses and private residents. So I know that security is all of our business, and we're all supposed to, be security conscious. And this is one of the ways that we show that we're security conscious. And if you even look at what has been happening around in many places where you see maybe somebody's caught on camera, usually these footages are from private, facilities. But it doesn't remove the fact that government is supposed to also have its own in strategic places.
Yeah.
So while they're enforcing that for private people, I also hope that government has plans, and not what we heard with the CCTV scandal in Abuja. I hope that they have plans to also put their own in place.
And as a matter of fact, it would be important to also state that I don't think they should approach the way they do things normally, because he also did say, when we asked him, that yes, they will require some of those footage if there's any security issue that needs to be done. So if you have those closed-circuit cameras in your premise or premises, who knows? It remains to be seen what the law says you can give or what the law says you can't give. If it's in your private bedroom, are you allowed to? Can they request that? If it's outside your gate, maybe, because of course there are things you want to keep personal. So I don't know how Edo State wants to approach this. In fact, FCT will need to ask them more questions. But if it's in public places, government knows that they need to do their jobs. And this government, by the way, this government and this IGP, they need to speak up about where are we now? Or even the FCT minister. Are the CCTVs functional? We spent a lot of money on those ones. How much are they going to cost? Why are they not functioning? Who took those contracts? Look, there's no time, it's not time bound. If you embezzled the money 5 years ago, the law can still catch up with you. Indeed. If it was 10 years ago, the law can still catch up with you. So nobody should tell me, I won't look at what happened. No. The law is the law. Or else, people will be encouraged to go do it. Pray that a Joseph or a Pharaoh that knows you comes in after 8 years. The one that comes, he doesn't know you're gone with the wind. That's not how it works. All right.
That's not how it should work. I think there's one more.
Yeah.
And I think the lead story on the front page of this one, we missed it just briefly. This Nigeria says, you better step aside. That's your lead story on the front page, plain on the name boy. There. You better step aside. That's the lead story on the front page of This Nigeria. You see right there, Tinubu suspends humanitarian affairs and poverty alleviation minister over 585 million naira scandal. Edu denied access to president in Aso Villa. EFCC quizzes embattled minister today. Ndume, Sheikh Husani, others hail suspension. So it's right there on the front page. But I think one story for us to highlight would be this Anambra boat mishap. 4 still missing as NIWA confirms 8 deaths, 38 survivors. First, Chamberlain, I think you highlighted that Supreme Court judgment, which gives absolute control to the federal government in terms of regulation of the waterways. It'll be interesting to see how the states digest that particular ruling. I think it came in about 2 days ago. It's still not clear. We're seeing it being highlighted, just yesterday. But the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of the federal government. But these deaths we continue to see on our waterways as a result of a lack of safety that we have not yet put in place with regards to the use of our waterways. Something urgent needs to be done about it. Last year, we lost a lot of lives. If we put together the number of lives we lost as a result of waterways mishaps in Taraba, in Niger, the number comes up to something. And now, this new year, we hear that 5 people have lost their lives as a result of, just using the waterways. I think that, we need to pay a little more attention to safety on our waterways. And I know that we've not heard the last of this. I mean, of course, the Supreme Court is the last court, but I think it'll be interesting to know precisely what the states, how they're going to internalize, as Chamberlain would say, the judgment as given by the Supreme Court of Nigeria.
Backdoor for water resources bill. All right, so there you go. That ends it with a look at some of the dailies here this morning. We're back in a moment. Stay on with us. All right, welcome back. Yes, indeed, following through from what transpired yesterday. So we've got Adeniyi Kunu, who is a lecturer and a researcher. He joins us virtually this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. So
thank you very much for having me. I appreciate you.
Quite a number of developments now, particularly with the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. So the former minister, Sadiya Umar Farouk, under the watch of the EFCC, they did invite her. She showed up yesterday. And then the CEO of UNSIPA, she's now suspended, Halima Shehu, for some allegations, including 44 billion, which they said was transferred to her account, or she did it. And then you have the current minister who is being suspended to investigate what transpired, how she approved 585 billion naira to, they say, project accounts so that they can investigate properly. So quite a lot happening so quick and fast for lots of people, particularly with that ministry. Just perhaps many suggest some fundamental question that needs to be asked about what goes on there. So for you, you might have done a research or two about this one. What sticks out for you?
Well, I think the response of the president stands out for me as something we perhaps find difficult to see in the over 20-year period of the current dispensation, talking about the Fourth Republic. And I must say that I'm happy that the president asked or actually took that very strong position to let her go for now while the investigation is on. But I need to say that this is not just about Betta Edu. It has to do with the cracks on the walls before Betta Edu actually assumed that position. Let's understand that the last person that served in a position did not account to Nigerians how they actually distributed certain monies during COVID. I have spoken strongly on different platforms that the former minister, quite frankly, alongside the embattled Mr. Emefiele, took Nigerians for those who do not know what they are doing because they never accounted. That should have been enough sign that the ministry needs attention and the leadership of the country should ensure that whoever occupies that office plugs every hole. But it's actually something that has come to be. And I don't want people to take it along the lines of, okay, what a man can do, a woman has done. I think that that is really illogical. And those who say such things are being disrespectful to both sexes. But the reality now, it's about a system. Now, respective acts, particularly the one that deals with financial responsibility as regards fiscal financial responsibility, has indicated that nobody, Chapter 7, Section 2719 of that Act 2009 talks about not putting personal money into government accounts and not also putting government money into personal accounts. So Mrs. Betta Edu may not be able to explain herself properly because in the first place, 587 million belong to Akwa Ibom, Calabar, Lagos, and Ogun. How did that eventually find itself in the account of a supposed permanent secretary who is meant to be the project accountant? So that itself is questionable. Now, there are certain things that people do that at times they do not quite understand the implications of their action. Now, I don't want to go with the bandwagon social media and, the social media court. The reality is many persons that occupy such exalted offices oftentimes forget that as a minister, you still have limitations. And that is why we've found out that certain predecessors in different offices, particularly ministerial positions, have erred. Let's look at certain things that the likes of Adisireka did. Let's look at Ahmed Idris, the former Accountant General of the Federation, and many of their likes who, for instance, during the leadership of the former president, the Minister of Agriculture was sent packing. Mr. Nanuno, the Minister of the one that took charge of power was sent packing. Why? Certain things happened by these ministers because they feel that assuming that position means they can do anything. Let's also understand, Dr. Betta Edu came to that position first as a commissioner for health. She perhaps understood that field. She came as the leader of the APC. Now she has assumed a greater position. So at times when ministers come to certain positions, one thing that remains fundamental is to give them crash courses to be able to understand the dynamics of their offices. So when they come there, I think that this experience or this happening that is obviously a national embarrassment to us has brought to the fore the need for every minister to go at least on 2-3 weeks retreat after they have been appointed so that they can understand the expectations, the demands, the guidelines of the new office they occupy. While I'm not making excuses for better I do, and the reality is, even if you err, the law is there. What you don't know, you make inquiries about. So it's quite sad an experience that this particular woman has actually found herself in the net. But again, I need to say that it is not just about that ministry. It is about every ministry that actually falls under the auspices of the president of this country. It's sad that we're having such things happen at the moment. I need to say this.
Indeed, and we can hear already that the president is asking for a full detail. I mean, he wants a full breakdown of the accounting processes within the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. Because as you've also highlighted, and I think has been said in the news over and over again, it's not just about the current minister. The former minister is also having questions to answer at the EFCC, as well as the NSIPA boss who was removed from her position for alleged financial misappropriation. So, excuse me, you've highlighted the fact that we do not exactly have a process whereby ministers, come to account to Nigeria, which will be an external account to citizens. But it seems that there is also a lack of internal accounting processes whereby they also, give an account to the person who has appointed them. It seems that there's been no interest before now in terms of, what exactly is happening in each ministry and an accounting process, from the minister to the person who has appointed him or her. So if we're to change that, because you are saying that you've also noticed that it would seem that there is a lack of understanding of the accounting processes too on the part of the ministers. You're asking that we give a crash course. Well, some people will say we have a retreat. We know that after ministers are appointed, there's usually what they call a ministerial retreat. Do you think that, or don't you think that that is sufficient enough to be able to, at least put the ministers through the basics? Because apparently we do not exactly have a school of government where people can go and learn, how to be ministers. But at least in that crash course of some sort, don't you think it should be enough to help ministers settle in the first few weeks or months and know what exactly is expected of them?
All right, let me make certain things clear. By virtue of my, proximity to media activity, I can say with every sense of fact that some of those retreats have its formalities, but the reality is it is less, I need to say, of getting the new ministers acquainted with the nitty-gritty of the things that they're supposed to do when they eventually get into office. Then I need to also let us understand that oftentimes, majority of those who assume new ministerial positions belong to a political party. So it is more or less a consolidation of the power that has been attained. And I have to say this, albeit painfully, and less of making them understand that they cannot fail Nigerians on the job, but they talk more about it is our time to be there. And that itself has reflected. Let me do a retrospection here to tell you that such retreats do not have effect. At the last assembly, I remember that the same Sadiya Umar Farouk was with the lawmakers to actually account for certain spendings. The former minister doesn't understand what the word impress meant. And that is somebody who occupies the ministerial position of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the most populous black nation in this country that has produced great minds that are calling their shots across the country. So it seems as if it is a reflection of the incompetence of us bearing leadership over the rest of us that have certain leadership capacities. So in the first place, let's understand this. Whilst the processes have been bungled, these retreats we're talking about should even have the persons who should be leading such sessions as the permanent secretaries of every ministry. For instance, the Bridget Oniyelu that have the monies paid into accounts, has she understood that she's equally accountable to the person that she's under her auspices, she would have actually informed the minister that, ma'am, according to the processes in the ministry, you can't pay this money into my account. Now, I brought something out there. There is a very deliberate empowerment of individuals who violate processes rather than giving respect and regard to the processes of institutions. With every sense of humility, I've been to certain parts of the world. And I can tell you here that when you see a stop sign, you cannot drive past a stop sign, because I quite frankly drive around when I'm not in the country. It means that that rule is binding on the high and mighty and the low wherever the person finds himself. But in this country, except of course if it's incidents of maybe the only time, for instance, in America, where you have to park your vehicle aside is when you hear that the police is after somebody or the fire service are trying to go and do something emergency. Lawmakers don't jump traffic. In this country, a lawmaker that is now the Senate President, Akpabio, almost got himself killed for not respecting traffic rules. Why? Because individuals in Nigeria are more powerful than institutions and respect for such dictates or guidelines. And that is the exact thing that is happening to Better Edu now, who should have been advised by the permanent secretary, because the paperwork for 585.something million would never have gone to any individual account without the knowledge of the permanent secretary in the ministry, without the person who heads the accounting office in that ministry, without the person who heads procurement. There are lots of principal officers, for instance, deputy directors and directors in that particular ministry, deputy director administration, deputy director audit, deputy director accounting, deputy director, I think logistics, deputy director or directors procurement. This list of persons always have their signature, because I have worked in the civil service before, and I know that even when we go on training back then, when I was still in the civil service, you would always have the paper for as little as 100,000 signed by these respective persons that have called. So we should ask the permanent secretaries, the head of procurement, head of accounting, head of audit, head of admin, whether they did not see the paperwork that actually they themselves are pending to have allowed Better Edu violate the responsibility provisions as it is available since 2009. And that is why, quite frankly, this country must be deliberate about the change we talk about. If ministers that should be exemplary actually have violated this, then what are we going to say? And it is consecutive. How, for instance, can somebody, you talked about Halima Shehu, over 30 billion was not accounted for. If we remember during COVID, because there's a nexus here. And this is an international platform where people who hear us should understand that if there's a nexus, the person who appoints into a position must take caution. The reason Better Edu had to do this without the needful circumspection, without caution, was because she felt this is a party affair. While you were on the headlines, one of the things you read was Better Edu was not granted access to see the president because it is believed that as former woman leader in the APC, anything goes. And perhaps that was why she felt, even if I'm suspended, I can go and explain myself personally to the president. And I'm happy they didn't allow her have access.
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you think that was really the reason? Because some people will say, I mean, you blamed it on anything goes. But some people will say that from what we understand, yesterday we had the privilege of speaking with a consultant who's worked also with the federal government. And he says what this practice, even though it's against the law, has been some convenience put in place whereby monies are paid into the account of a programs officer so that, to ease the workings within the ministry. Now, as I said, I'm not making any excuses for them, but this is some culture that has now been adopted. Do you think that she really thought that she was doing anything wrong? If they say, Madam, now so we they do for here. Do you think that she would have been doing anything wrong? I mean, how can somebody go against the grain, especially if the person knows that not going that way is going to hamper how he or she is able to deliver?
All right, let me share an experiential thing with you here. When I joined the Nigerian academia, I enjoyed a lot of independence before I became a lecturer, and I could actually do lots of things by virtue of access, perhaps media experience. Now, I found it easy when I joined the academia to move from one person's office to the other and just make certain requests, even official. Then later I was told, as much as you could speak with people, there are certain things you have to do. Mark, but the reality is such processes are not known to law. And that is why we have to talk about this disregard for processes. The reality is process actually account for orderliness everywhere. If you come to certain places, they tell you in 5 days, in 10 days, in 2 weeks, in 3 months, especially if you've done quite a number of things, which I know you and Chamberlain have done, you have to follow those processes. I think that even if they are told better, that is how we do it. I think that she, having served as a commissioner in a state, there are certain amounts of money that I am aware of that commissioners cannot even sign. It has to go from the signature of the governor. So if Betta Edu understands the basic, that there are certain amounts of money that shouldn't go, I think she's in a better position to have said, if this particular thing comes from my office to another person's account, I hope there won't be problems. And I think that she also understands there are two sides to this coin. Now, so with the do it's not proper. Okay, let me send this money to the right person, or perhaps I could give the authorization. Because part of what has caused this problem for her was that she was not even authorized. Now, one thing is sending the money into somebody's personal account. The next thing is not being the individual who should even send the money. Perhaps if she had spoken to maybe the Minister of Finance, or she has spoken to the person who accounts for such disbursements, even in that ministry, we won't have better idea, just at the guillotine this morning. So it is very key for the people who administer, more or less like the president, violating certain processes, such as we saw happen in the past administration, where at some point the president, without consent or resort to the Senate, approved over $1 billion to buy ammunition without appropriate approval from the Senate. The first tenure of the president, the former president, did that. So whilst we knew back then that it was important for him to secure the lives of Nigerians, he bungled the process. And he did that because he felt they have the power. So if you look at that, that is the microcosm of what happens in the country, where people who hold power suddenly forget that there are processes. And until we understand that this country is not a banana republic, and the founding fathers and mothers understood processes, or else we wouldn't have had anything to build upon. So I need to say this, that this is a lesson and a case in point. And Betta Edu must understand that this, if at all she got out unscathed, is going to be a point for every other. But then if you look at it also, Betta Edu's experience has become an instructive position for anybody who holds ministerial position or heads any agency under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Perhaps people felt he's a jolly good man. We stood with him, but he has actually sent a message to detractors right now that I will use the carrot and stick approach if you violate processes. And I'm happy that he was able to do that, because it shows that people's reaction matters to the president, and I hope that he has to keep it up. There are lots of other things that must also happen retroactively. First, I'm happy that Saidiya Umar Farouk is there. I think that Hadi Sirika has spent too much time without coming to explain lots of things. Many other persons who headed ministries must also be able to speak to issues that have become something that Nigerians are vehemently opposed to. And do not forget that one of the things that enabled the fluidity of leadership, particularly this administration, would be to actually consistently take the pulse of Nigerians and be able to listen. Because quite frankly, the dynamics of information has actually changed right now. The way people react to issues have changed. The presence of social capacities with every level of data by to grab has actually changed everything. We therefore need a sane society so that the dividends of leadership and, of course, representative governance can be fully optimized.
Okay, let me take this to my colleague, Ayo, in Lagos. Ayo.
Thank you, Maokwe. Well, Mr. Kunu, it's good to have you again. When you were talking about the process of getting into governance and ensuring that people do what is expected of them, I recall having this conversation with a former minister of the FCT and 2 other ministries, Mr. Aliyu Modibo, who right now is also one of the president's aides, and saying that if any minister must succeed, they must engage significantly with the civil service bureaucracy, talking about the directors, permanent secretaries, and all. He also advised that if a minister finds that he or she cannot work well with a particular minister, that particular person can ask for a replacement from the head of the civil service, and that will be done for him or her. But one of the things that a number of people are saying, I'm believing, hopefully investigations will reveal further, is that maybe the minister really wasn't able to work well enough with the civil service, perhaps because of the noise, the talk making the rounds, that civil servants are the way they are, they can frustrate anyone, they are corrupt and all of those things. So that allegation is out there. In terms of the process of onboarding ministers, what is your advice? How do you think, because someone who is just coming into office, the minister, the suspended minister, is a young person and definitely has what it takes. Otherwise, the president wouldn't have even allowed himself to put such anyone in office who expectedly is not going to perform as well. So in terms of onboarding them, you have faulted that process. What have we missed? And what should be done going forward? What's the lesson for us as a government in Nigeria?
All right. In the first place, I think that the civil service of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, where I had worked before, has a lot of hands that can indeed guide anybody that assumes any position in virtually all ministries of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. One of the things that I found out is every minister who assumes a new position immediately appoints any other person from outside to work closely with him or her, but the people that have been there for 15, 20 years are often operating from outside the circle. The first solution would be that for everybody who assumes a ministerial position, at least you need 5 directors that must be appointed as special advisors to that minister. When Mark started this conversation with me, I talked about the head of admin for the ministry, the head of accounts for the ministry, the head of procurement, the head of audit, and of course the head of accounting. I mentioned logistics, I beg your pardon as well. Now, these people that I've talked about, in some ministries you have the head of operations for certain units. You need about 5 directors that they have to be seconded for the period that the minister position actually lasts. That means when you have these 5 capable hands, compulsorily put as special advisors to any minister, that means the minister has actually salvaged that ministry by at least 60%. The minister can then decide to take maybe 4 or 5 others to work directly with these respective persons that I've mentioned, and I can tell you, there is a guarantee of absolute success in the deliverable of such ministers. You can quote me to the world end, because I have been in that system before, and because I observed keenly how certain things were done inappropriately or appropriately, I realized, quite frankly, that some of these things could be addressed, and that's why you asked me a very fantastic question. That's number 1. Number 2, as you rightly said, some of these directors may want to undermine, for instance, any ministers that are maybe younger than them, or somebody that has another area of expertise, and the person was actually appointed to become the minister. It is not only that they should replace the person, it should be made a compulsory decision by the president, who is the appointer of these ministers, that immediately these ministers actually assumes office, you cannot act in any way that things show insubordination. It's certain things by executive order become sanctions that cannot be disregarded by people. And it is simply because we have not seen the president, properly make use of this power to get the best out of the people that can deliver. And you'd agree with me. I did well over 12, 13 years in the ministry. And the things I knew today, even while I was not in admin, I was not in accounting, was because I actually listened and made friends of people who understood better. I can tell you here that if the president, for instance, hopefully there is always room, the president can, between now and next week, because anytime we're on air like this, they listen to us, the president can make that order right now and second these respective persons that I've mentioned to go straight to these respective ministries and make things happen. I can tell you that that is very possible.
But then another, talking about the, for you, would you say that this issue we are raising is political or governmental in nature? Looking at, because you saw the initial pushback of the minister herself saying all of this was, political machinations trying to discredit her and the presidency of Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Do you see how much of this, in your opinion, is politics? How much of it has to do with governance? How much of it is bureaucratic? What are the issues here for you? What levels or platforms would you put them?
In the first place, you talked about bureaucracy. If the minister hadn't disregarded bureaucracy, she wouldn't be in this mess. That's the first thing. So before we begin to talk about politics, before we begin to talk about competence, what's the bureaucracy? The civil service of every country has bureaucratic processes. It could be cumbersome, it could be complex, but because it is a fact of the matter of such ministries, you cannot actually turn down the bureaucracy. So what Mrs. Betta Edu is saying there regarding certain, which I read her comment. I think that one of the things that help us heal quickly in individual relationships and such corporate brouhahas we have it is actually to ensure that we take responsibility for the things we don't do right. Mrs. Betta Edu is not remorseful for having violated the process. And I think it's that kind of feeling that these are my enemies. No. We've always been told that anytime something happens, we look in the mirror first. Mrs. Betta Edu is not looking in the mirror. The person who erred right now happens to be Mrs. Betta Edu. So the first thing I expected her to have done was to say, I gave room for this entrapment. And even if these were to be certain pitfalls set for her by maybe political enemies, or the fact that the people who happen to be those she took over from didn't feel good that they are being investigated when another minister is there and perhaps is the one responsible, I guess that it is completely wrong of her to have even made a statement. I think it is important for her to have said, oh, this is the process I met on ground. And that is why when people appoint special advisors into offices, people have to be those that think out of the box. I have left jobs, Ayo, because when we agree on certain things when I start the jobs, and immediately we start to want to change, I respectfully maintain my relationship with you, but I take a walk. Because after all said and done, the responsibility of incompetence or not to fall on my shoulders, and I don't want to be held as somebody who doesn't know what he's doing. So what I'm bringing out of this conversation is that, Ayo, we have to try as much as possible to tell the minister, because she's obviously watching us this morning, that, Madam, you should take responsibility for what you did not do right. Madam Betta Edu had served as a commissioner. In fact, she served at the height of COVID. She went around that particular Cross River State meeting people. I saw she was a very active person that I commended who worked with Governor Ben Ayade. But the reality is you can't be talking like this because you understand the expectations and the demands of your office. So in the first place, she doesn't understand bureaucracy. She perhaps felt, I am the minister and I can never be questioned. And at the same time, let me say this, I have been within the corridors of working. I held an appointment before the last election. I was the spokesperson to a presidential candidate at the last election. And the reality was that politics is a game of dog eats dog. You will always even have enemies that are within close quarters, and they'll be expecting you to err so that they can be closer to the person who gave you that position. That means the school of hard knocks is what everybody must know about. The school of rougher politics is what you are aware of. There should have a high level of intellection to be able to practice politics. And it's not peculiar to Nigeria. It's peculiar to different parts of the world. So street sense, book sense, area boy sense, has to be a balancing of the act to play politics with the kind of people we have in this country. Why you will not air?
Yeah. Yes, it sounds to me, Mr. Kunu, that we need to have that school of government that Mokwe talked about earlier, so that all of these issues that you are raising. But you know, there's also this assumption that could come up from time to time. You know, from time to time when some issues come up in governance and people are raising issues and there is attention or focus on someone, you just see that some other issues will arise, kind of drawing attention away from this particular one that, you know, many people tend to be interested in. And it is something that probably could have been avoided, but hey, the attention is now on. So there are those who might be thinking, for instance, that is it possible that the issues being made out of what is happening with the Minister of the Humanitarian Affairs right now is an attempt to distract from the investigation of the previous minister or the fellow that was also suspended by the president? Yes. Do you see that kind of thing happening, that this attention being given to Dr. Betta-Edu right now is to distract from the investigation of the previous minister or from the investigation of the previous NCIPA boss who was suspended?
I want to say that for us, let's get the optics right. Everything has to be on its merit. The previous minister already has a name in public domain as somebody who suddenly fell ill when he told her to come and account for the money that the country gave to her. The reality again was, if you look at how the former minister of the same office has been acting, she's been acting in such a way as to show that you can't ask me questions about an agency subordinated under me, as it were, because you're talking about the investment agency of the country. You're talking about the humanitarian ministry. I have to say this, Ayo, that nobody perhaps would have thought this would become a distraction. Of course, some other persons have said that, but my own is there are possibilities also, as I mentioned in my response earlier, that the former minister felt, okay, she probably dug the hole that has resulted in my being investigated. Let me also use those that are still loyal to me in that ministry to dig another hole for her. Perhaps Betta-Edu might not have even gone ahead to send that money into Bridget Onayelo's account. Maybe what she would have done was to have followed the due process. We never knew what happened before the money was transferred on her instruction. But the point again is, one major event always distracts from the previous one. Because if you look at it, the decibels produced from the invitation of the last person appears to have gone low. And the decibel of Betta-Edu is actually resonating in far and near quarters. So I think that perhaps has achieved one thing, which is to distract us, even if we cannot maybe ascertain if that was the intent at the outset. But it is very obvious now that Betta-Edu is right on the guillotine. I hope that our neck doesn't get severed. Speaking metaphorically now. So I think that right now, what we need to have on equal scales is to look at the connection between the former minister and the current minister, which is that both persons could not account for money properly approved for their ministry and have disbursed strongly. Let me remind the world here, Ayo, that the Social Economic Rights Accountability Project had gone to court requesting. COVID got into the world 2019 December. 2020 lockdown started. 2021, 2022, 2023, Madam Sadiya Umar Farouk has not been able to tell us, because that is another matter, the people she went to give money to when the entire country was on lockdown. Mr. Godwin Emefiele, apart from having kept over £500 million of our money in over 500 accounts in the US, London, and China, has not been able to provide a list of those children that they went to give money to when the country was on lockdown. Because we cannot allow this kind of malfeasance continue. We want Nigeria to thrive. We have decided to be patriots because that is where we can claim our patrimony as those that are common stakeholders. But the people that have the privilege of leadership are taking us for granted. So I think that this has achieved one aim, distracting us. But the reality of what you've done right now, Ayo, is to have brought back every issue on the front burner such that we can look at each on its merit of discredit and of course what they've done wrong to the country. So right now, Bett Aidu on the guillotine. Right now, Sadiya Umar Farouk on the guillotine. Right now, Halima Shehu on the guillotine. But I don't know if anybody said it's going to get severed. But again, let me say this, that it has brought in the gender capacity narrative that many of us are always quick to talk about when it comes to relationship. What am I bringing out now? If you look at the affirmation action that has moved from about 10, 15, and 25%, such that we have women participate in politics, it appears as if this is not about a gender problem or incapacity, it's about a human problem and a lack of values to be able to deliver on account of people's terms of preference. Because before this time, women have always had issues. And of course, we support women. We are fathers to daughters and sons, as I am here. We therefore cannot allow women to be left out because we don't even know where our children will find themselves in the very near future, which is come. So when you talk about Bett Aidu as a woman in this kind of problem, you talked about Halima Shehu in this problem, you talked about Sadiya Umar Farouk. We've never seen such case in this country where 3 women are in certain financial quagmire because of the sleaze that have been associated with them. And I think it is not even good for the female gender. And the prospect of having more female representation in high-level politics in this country has perhaps been jeopardized by this, because people will refer to them. They have become terms of reference. They have become pointers to what we do not want. But again, let us look at it. How much do we bring issues of male malfeasance to the front border? I've been saying this before now, that the level of speed with which they are asking Sadiya Umar Farouk to come and answer for what she couldn't account for, they have not done that for Adisirika, who went to rent an Ethiopian airline to do national carrier. I guess that these issues are fundamental. So for now, let's look at the people that are on the front burner of these issues so that we can have issues dealt with properly, I need to say.
Well, Mr. Kunu, let me take you back to my colleagues in Abuja now.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Ayo. So there are a couple of things here. You know, when you hear them say, look, this is the process, she said it was approved, and many keep wondering, of course, there are several unanswered questions, and some of them we've put out there, which we'll see as part of our questions for the day. You know, there are several procedural questions that need to be answered for those who are investigating this matter. But what we gathered over time concerning this matter, her predecessor, and then the suspended Halima Shehu, is that there were those who told us that, look, this project directorship, you have it in almost all the ministries, that is how they operate. And that the former government also operated in a similar way. And that if they deny, it's a question of time, those details will come out. So if you were to respond to that now, that they say, look, because now the government says, look, step aside to allow for investigation. Now, if what they say behind the scene is correct, that, look, this is how they've always been operating, what would you expect then from this investigation?
That is how they have been operating. For the EFCC and other agencies that have been assigned to investigate this issue, the question for them first would be, what does the rule book say? Because in the first place, when you go to court, nobody's going to ask you what happened. If you had accused somebody or you are to defend yourself in court, the evidence must be brought before the judge. Paperwork, guidelines, Act, the Constitution, the EFCC Act, the ICPC Act. These are documents that guide certain financial activities as far as such fiscal financial policies are concerned. So for the EFCC right now, apart from somebody coming to tell us that that is how they've been operating, the EFCC would have to bring to the front border, what does the rule book say regarding this thing that we're doing? And I can tell you, on a scale of 1 to 10, Bett Aidu didn't get it right 9 over 10. Let me say this. There are certain extenuating circumstances, for instance, which could make people in ministries perhaps feel, okay, this is how we want to do because it becomes easier. What if, for instance, somebody decides that I'm not going to have a project manager for this. I'm going to use people in the ministries. For instance, if we go back to the era of the Lagos we have today, because some persons don't understand, when Jakande built Lagos State, understand that historical record. I'm from Lagos in Badagry, so, and I'm grown enough to understand what Jakande did. When Jakande built Lagos, the Lagos we find today, and all those houses that they call Jakande houses, were built by the Lagos State Public Works Bureau. Nobody outside those within the civil service ensured that those structures were put in place. And let nobody tell me that such things are not possible again. I'm simply saying here that if somebody said that is how we have been doing it, does it make it right? More or less like you want to eat and you feel your hands are not dirty. Often they tell you, wash your hands before you eat. Does it make it right for you to eat without washing your hands? No, because you're likely to take germs into your mouth. So it's the same thing with these particular provisions they made for themselves that are not known to law, because the truth right now is the EFCC will not operate with Naso with the Duam. The EFCC will operate by saying Naso the book say make we Duam.
The thing now is this. Unfortunately, we don't have the ICPC before us, because part of the questions we would have put to them is, if they told us that the last government operated this way, and that in fact, which ministry today will tell us that they don't have project directors or accountants if they've not been operating that way? Because isn't this what the ICPC is supposed to have found out a long time ago? For instance, they also wonder, all of these questions as to the former ministry, these are things that the ICPC should have seen a long time ago, before it came to this stage where the EFCC had to come in.
Okay, let me tell you this. I have a certification in project management. And if you look at how ministries are, oftentimes those that are called project managers also hold certain other offices, and they cap that out because, of course, I have not seen, for instance, any ministry that is called Ministry of Project Management in the country. That simply means such offices are carved out of necessity within ministry to be able to carry out certain functions. But I need to put it right to you here, Chamberlain, that from what we have on ground, it's going to be really, really difficult for that to be accommodated. And let me also tell you this. You mentioned something about the practice in the former administration. While the president said this is renewed hope, that he was going to consolidate what the former administration did, maybe this happens to be one of the consolidation. But again, if it's consolidating what his predecessor did, it wouldn't have better able to actually be suspended. Because don't forget, for every leadership that comes to place, there is what we call executive brief that goes to the president. If Gbajabiamila doesn't see that, Mr. George Akume sees it, that means if the president is not actually, with enough time to look at those executive briefs. And if that is actually the practice, then Better Edu must really explain. Because if you look at it, there are always handover notes that includes projects that were not completed, money is being owed, money is not completely spent, and what they perhaps have bargained, or if at all they are contractors. So if, for instance, you have handover note from the previous administration reflect that for perhaps fluidity of project execution, perhaps, unhindered or smooth functionality of the respective agencies in government, we created that project manager role to allow this happen, then maybe she has to eventually be let off the hook. But we must understand here, Chamberlain, that if the rule book tells us that certain things must be followed, it's always difficult at times when bureaucracy looks at us in the eye. But could it endeavor certain levels of sacrifice and allow processing? And if at all such processes will not be recognized as a non-documented way of doing things, such as we have unwritten constitution in the United Kingdom, then perhaps it has to be generally agreed to that it is a norm in this country that in ministries, you can actually do certain things without the GROM norm that guides you when you have to do it. So I guess that is the way to go there. I need to say that.
Well, I have to thank you for at least, being fair when you brought in the gender dimension into the discussion. Please. The fact that, 3 women are currently within the custody of the EFCC and being given room to account for what it is that they've done. And, the big questions as to whether or not, we've seen that with men as well, or we're seeing that sort of searchlight being beamed in ministries headed by men. It'll be interesting to see in the coming days.
The law says anyone who's caught.
Anyone, yes. Interestingly, anyone. But sometimes it seems that when it comes to women, there's always a higher expectation. But let us move to, what you actually expect. We know that now the EFCC is looking into this matter. We've been told that the president, mandated that a probe be instituted. But some people have said, oh, look, this is what we always get. A committee will be set up. Some probe will be instituted. We never really get the outcome of this probes. So how quickly, because a number of people will say, yes, it is good that the president has acted very swiftly on this particular matter, but how quickly do we expect the results of this investigation to be out? Because let's not forget, somebody's name, the names of these ministers are at stake. The former minister and the current minister. If there's been any malfeasance, of course, people expect swift prosecution. But in the event that, they haven't exactly done anything wrong, some people will say, well, then their names need to be cleared. You don't think so?
Well, I think it's important for us not to only hear the EFCC speak. It is important for this woman, if at all they have something that they need to clarify, to be heard equally as we're hearing the EFCC, to be heard equally as we're hearing people on social media who perhaps do not even understand the dimensions or the dynamics of this issue. It is very important to understand that these people whose names are in public domain, they've got members of their families also going through the trauma of this ordeal. Do not forget, we cannot call them guilty until every investigation has actually been rounded off. But again, it is key for us to understand that we have an opportunity to strengthen our institutions at this point because we've weakened this institution. Anybody who takes government office or public office should understand that immediately you limit the things that you should do, there are consequences. Every time we hear the EFCC go after people, on a scale of 1 to 10, the EFCC has 3/10. You can actually go and do your background check and understand that the EFCC has lost more cases than it has won when it comes to corruption issues since it was founded in the year 2000. And that is the fact of the matter. I'm saying here right now that it is key. It is key for the EFCC to actually allow fair hearing, for everybody being investigated. It is very key for the EFCC to ensure that if they make a noise about them, they also allow these people make a noise about their side of the story. Because obviously the EFCC keep giving us updates on this woman. They've got husbands, they've got children, they've got family members, and stigma is hanging in the air. And metaphorically, as I said, the guillotine is there right to their necks. That is one part. But at the same time, we have to also understand that no man can be described as infallible. I'm not making excuses. I wouldn't know if this can be described as honest mistakes. And because, again, we have, I'm going to bring in the gender dynamics. It is not always very good, quite frankly, when women who are epitome of fruitfulness fall into this kind of gallows. I can tell you that. We have few women in Nigerian politics, especially at the highest level. And you're supposed to have more female models, role models that will be looked up to. Perhaps people who believe that they can also add their quota and make the country better. This kind of experience will also make them want to retract and say, I don't want anybody to expose me, because women usually will come with a lot of emotions if any of their own is affected by this kind of thing. So I really have to say now that they must be given fair hearing. And if at all they've done anything that is wrong, quite frankly, the EFCC must consider, and the president must also consider, that there are measures you put in place that must be corrective rather than destructive. Because if you look at women in Nigerian politics, for instance, let me go to the EFCC. When Farida Waziri was in office, she was a victim of, permit the metaphor, hyenas and jackals. There was a particular that was at some point at the House of Rep. the people around her also became hyenas and jackals. I'm sorry. I'm using it metaphorically because this is an international TV and I'm trying to choose my words carefully. I'm saying here that our women therefore must understand that the politics they are interested in is a battlefront. And that is why when Ayo was actually having a discussion with me, I said, you must not only understand book to get into Nigerian politics, you must understand that politics has a universal ruffle. Let me use that again, literally. Because if you don't understand the mudslinging of politics, you will always fall into the pit dug by your enemies, even within the same political sphere. I'm therefore saying right now that Betta Edu demands fair hearing, Sadia Umar Farouk demands fair hearing, Alima Shehu demands fair hearing, and it is only when they are fairly heard and they are corrected rather than destroyed that we can have a balancing of scales. Because if you look at it, every governor that left office has been investigated, but none of these governors, even after they have lost their immunity, have actually been tried. It means that it seems as if the male power is strengthened to guarantee certain level of protection that these women are not able to evolve themselves. Let us be fair. Men have held political position and are strong in it for many years, and perhaps understand the internal workings to avoid being actually sent to jail. We have to also protect women who are falling into this ditch, because I know that if we balance how we allow justice to be meted, we definitely will have a balancing of skills. Let's be careful.
Let me just interrupt you, Mr. Kunwa. I can tell you for free that my colleague Chamberlain is shaking his head here and doesn't agree with you. But thank you so much for the advice you're giving to female politicians, because we're hoping to actually encourage more of them. I mean, of course, they have to do things properly and follow processes and be accountable. They actually have to show better example than their male colleagues. But let me ask you, because my question to you was very specific about time frame. How quickly do you hope that this matter will be out in the open and the EFCC will be done with this investigation? 2 weeks, 1 month? How much time are you giving them?
2 months. 2 months is perfect for this investigation. Because don't forget, when the investigation is eventually rounded off, they will have to submit papers. And when they submit papers, it will be looked at. There has to be a white paper released to that effect, decision made. But I'm worried, really. I'm worried because, for instance, the federalism discussion that was headed, there was a panel set up since 2018 for us to know what true federalism is in this country. The former governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, was the one who headed that committee. Since 2018, Malkwe, they've rounded off the committee's report and they have not submitted that report for action. For instance, when Amnesty International in Nigeria investigated people that were in IDP camps and there were reports of rapes by people that were supposed to be protected, Amnesty International did their report, gave it to the Nigerian government. Former Vice President Osinbajo also sat, and they also produced another report by the federal government. Mark, as I'm speaking, those things have gathered dust. So I hope that this will not go in the way of previous investigations and reports that are never attended to. Don't forget, the comfort was there by the former president in 2014, Goodluck Jonathan. The comfort was supposed to be a report of people who sat and met to provide solution to the country's problem. Mark, what happened after that time? Confab has gathered too much dust that will need a carton of detergent to wash the dust of the report that they have also prepared. So I hope that this will not be another waste of taxpayers' money, because for this kind of investigation, the EFCC investigations will be going to different places where monies have been disbursed. They'll be looking at documents. They'll be traveling here and there to ensure that this investigation is actually thorough. This is something the president has demanded, and they have to do. You said what? So 2 months. 2 months is fine for it.
Part of what I try to say, I mean, one of my questions I disagree with you, is that it came across as though when you say the men have had time to learn, I thought it's supposed to be on a case-by-case basis. It's not that whoever gets in there, studies the system, goes and tells whoever is supposed to be the next minister. I'm not sure that that's how it works. But the thing is, part of the lessons here is that, look, whoever is seen to have flouted the law, unfortunately, they have to face it. Because, I mean, it's just like when you are in traffic and the agencies out there arrest the car, maybe the third car in line, maybe you followed, you ran the lights, and then you say, what about those other two people? Well, you are the one who's been caught. Did you break the rule or not?
But Chamberlain, you should have caught, the arrest should have started from the first.
No, that's where the challenge is. That's where the challenge is. You can't say, why didn't you catch those guys in front? Because you are the one who has been caught. You are the one breaking the law. So they need to face the question, did they break the law? Yes or no? So that's what it is. Of course, we should catch those guys. But it doesn't excuse what they've done.
We need more officers to ensure that everybody is arrested when the traffic is violated. but in truth, really, I think that this is an eye-opener for everybody, especially Chamberlain, you'd agree with me that women have never been this battered in politics in this country. Such back to back to back. It has actually sent lots of it has actually sent shivers down the spine of the female gender in this country. And I'm happy that nobody's looking at it as a witch hunt, because if our predecessor had been a male, the discussion would have changed. But I'm happy that this is about a woman in the ministry, preceded by another woman in the ministry, and everybody is being investigated. And I think that there's a balancing of the skills because of the persons there. I have to say that here.
All right. So we'll see what happens at the end of the day with all of these kinds of matters. But it is indeed clear that, I mean, certain things have just got to be done right. But we'll go to break in a moment. Just give us a moment. We'll come back to you. But we need to quickly head to Lagos and find out there's supposed to be some sort of construction going on the bridge there. So my colleague Ayo is on standby. So we'll toss to him, and then we're going to come back to you. Just hang on a minute. Ayo.
All right.
Thank you, Chamberlain. It's a quick trip to the Third Mainland Bridge. Olu Phillips is on standby. Olu, we know that this was supposed to begin today. So what's the update right now?
Thank you very much. We've been through this routine over the years. Several ministers for works. If you cast your mind back, some 6-7 years ago, no, some 8-9 years ago, under Onono Meme, we also saw this kind of construction happen under the last administration, or reconstruction and rehabilitation. And now there's a new government that's barely about 8 months old, and the Third Mainland Bridge is in the news again. And for those of you who this route is your go-to girl route, I'm not sure I can say, unfortunately, you would have to experience some delays in your movement, because in this free movement that you see of people running through the Third Mainland Bridge from where we are here, which is the Yanoro bus stop, very close to the pedestrian bridge, into the island, will be closed down. At noon today, this bridge will be closed down. And what that means is that if you're coming in the direction opposite me and heading into the island, you will not be able to do so until tomorrow morning. Now, so it's technically a 12-hourly program. And what that means is that once it's 12 o'clock, 12 noon, this place will be shut down. And only those who are returning from the island can use the outward bound into the mainland. And what that also means is that tomorrow morning, traffic will resume here, but you can't go all the way straight. You will make that diversion to the right, continue on the opposite direction, on the direction of a returning vehicle, get all the way to Adeniji, and zoom back into this same road, because the entire stretch will be closed down to rehabilitation. There will be milling, there will be excavation, and there will be resurfacing of asphalt on this bridge. And guess what, Ayo? Guess what, viewers? It's going to last for about 7 weeks. Means that the entirety of February, the remaining of January, and perhaps the first week in March, this part of the bridge will be closed down to rehabilitation and reconstruction, Ayo.
Well, from what you know, usually when we hear from the federal government that the Third Mainland is going to be closed for whatever length of time, there's usually that concern. Well, of course, you have also said it that we'll still be able to use that road, only now we're going to be using the other side. But from what you know, from what you are aware of, how well informed do you think people are about this arrangement that government has made?
If you want us to put this very succinctly and very frankly, as we do here on Channels Television, we've done this kind of reports and this kind of coverages over the last 1 decade. And I would tell you sincerely that this is the poorest we've seen in terms of traffic chaperone, in terms of preparedness by those who should be monitoring, those who should be chaperoning vehicles, who should be guiding, who should be informing. You saw the Federal Controller of Works Lagos yesterday on our studios, and she was trying hard not to do the job of the other agencies of Lagos State government, and including the Federal Road Safety Commission. For instance, in about an hour, this bridge is going to be closed down. How many? Just look behind me. How many traffic chaperones do you see here? None. Almost none. And as we drove around here, running through the alternative routes, we see a lot of traffic blockage. I can tell you will see that in Ojota, because the last man officials are even the ones stopping vehicles on the highway, allowing people to cross on the main carriageway where you have existing 2 pedestrian bridge. This is an abnormality and has continued, and that's the only alternative route, especially for those who are coming inward this way, and that road has not been cleared. We don't have information officers going around stations. We've not seen them in Channels Television, for instance, telling people what they need to know. We don't see signboards and signposts sufficient enough to warn people, to help people understand what they are going to be faced over the next 7 weeks. This is the reality, and someone needs to wake up to their job. Ayo.
Well, that's a very, very instructive one there, Olu. But another thing now that we are at least trying to inform people about this, so they're not stranded subsequently. And as you said, 7 weeks. That's quite a length of time in Lagos for a busy city like Lagos. What are the alternative routes that you think, have been prepared? And how feasible, how functional are those alternative routes as well? Because, as you said, the controller, federal controller, was in our studio yesterday, was trying to educate people around that. So, in terms of the alternative routes, do you think they are ready for this kind of heavy transition?
In a cosmopolitan city like Lagos, fast-growing economic city like Lagos, have you seen any 3D illustrations, for instance, with all of the IT professionals or with all of the expertise supposedly that work with the Lagos State government or with any of the federal agencies responsible for helping people understand road signs? We knew this was going to happen several months, even into last year, and nobody has thought it wise to make animations to help people to test run how things can be, what alternative routes will be like, what the hiccups will be, and how those hiccups will be dealt with. We don't see those samples. We don't see those animations. We don't see those activity. And you ask yourself, for a city that wants to shut down a major bridge, by a repair by the federal government for 7 weeks, and you have alternative routes like Ojota, which leads you to Carter Bridge and to Eko Bridge. For so many people, Third Mainland Bridge is the only route they really understand, connecting them between the mainland and the island. I am sure on this television, you will see the hiccups in the weeks to come. Ayo.
Well, that's not very, very good news to hear, my Olu, because a good number of people will be wondering right now exactly what we are supposed to do. But for those who are aware, of course, there are those who would say, okay, the state government may have put out some words on Twitter, but how far-reaching those things go, that's another thing, altogether. Now that this is on, what would be... How is this likely to affect employment? Because some are going to get to the office late and, may get to the office late, even in the light of this conversation that we are having. Now, for the people themselves, what would you recommend that they begin to do, particularly the people that will be affected? There will be events on the island that people will need to transit from the mainland to attend, things to do on the mainland for those on the island. What would be your recommendation from what you can see if the government, both at the federal and state levels, do not chip in and to do the needful of educating the people? What would be your recommendation to the commuters themselves, both those who are driving and those who are using public transport?
The viewers, especially those in Lagos, have, first of all, I recommend two things. They have two great morning shows to latch on to before they embark on their journey every day. We have the morning brief, it starts at 7 a.m. You want to make that program your friend. You have the Sunrise Daily, it starts at 9 a.m. You want to make that program your friend. You want to listen out as how you need to travel. That aside, now you need to also make your phone your friend. You need to go to all of your apps that allows you to see where the traffic is and where the alternative routes are. At least you see those mappings and know how to alternate. Now, if you're coming all the way and you have to hit 7-Up motorways area and it is already 11:30, please don't bother coming this way. Make a detour at Ojota and continue your way. There might be traffic, but please enjoy it. But if you miss that, shortly before Iyanoworo bus stop, make the last detour that takes you through Bagada all the way to Antony. Make the ramp down and join back to Ikorodu Road and continue your way to Western Avenue, Funshaw Williams, Eko Bridge or Carter Bridge. I hope those bridges are free. I hope those bridges are well lit at night. I hope those bridges are safe from hoodlums and for those who can harass you when you have a flat tire. This is the experience an average motorist goes through every day in Lagos. Someone needs to work.
Well, thank you so much, Olu. I'm pretty sure that you will not leave that place until you give us and Nigerians and something significant for them to have a bite on by the time you return. But thank you so much for your reporting this morning, Olu Phillips. And please do stay safe. Do ensure that you are secure yourself. Thank you. All right. So, well, that's the update, but just to also quickly inform you that concerning the closure of the Third Mainland Bridge, the Lagos State government indeed put out a statement that I'm not sure many people are aware of because, hey, how many of us are on Twitter anywhere, or X anyway? So the Lagos State government is informing you that emergency repairs of the Third Mainland Bridge will continue with the closure of Iyanoworo and to Adeniji bound by 11 a.m. today, 9th January 2024. The question is, and from what my colleague is saying, this is about 15 minutes. In fact, 12 minutes before 11, according to him, from what you can see, no sign of that happening. The closure is for effective repairs of the entire section of the bridge and is part of the ongoing work that started in November. So will we still be able to call it emergency repairs since the conversation began some months ago? But then there is the advisory for ease of commuting from 12 a.m. to 12 noon. The bridge is open for mainland to island travel, while those who intend to come from the island to the mainland are advised to use Eko Bridge. And conversely, from 12 noon to 12 a.m., that's 12 midnight, motorists will be able to access the bridge from the island to the mainland, while those that want to go from the mainland to the island will have to use Eko Bridge. Well, that's the update on Third Mainland concerning the Third Mainland Bridge here in Lagos. And Chamberlain, I understand that certain other constructions are going on in the capital city as well?
Okay. Well, yes, some things are going on here. So, you know, maybe somebody should listen to this one. I think we need to find a way to, for instance, if you get up in the morning and you employ a particular route and there's construction going on there, what are the chances that you will know before you step out of your home?
Big question, very big question, especially right here in the Federal Capital Territory where it seems that routes are changing every day. Someone was just saying, oh, look, the road has been closed. The normal roads now have been closed as a result of the construction work that is going on. And I say, oh, yeah, welcome to Wike's Abuja. It's the construction side. While it is a good thing, there needs to be ways of informing citizens ahead of time so that they are aware and they're able to plan their routes very properly.
And they also have to have proper signage, as it were, on the roads, so that you don't, it's not when you find out that you're already trapped. And the way it works, and you have to drive for a distance before you get to, as your map, if you use a map, recalculate, or you get to turn through other routes if you're not too familiar with all of those. And now that you know what PMS is.
Exactly. Petrol is not funny.
These things all matter. They
do
a lot better than all of this. But Mr. Kunu, I have to thank you for your time here this morning. Very early hours, as a matter of fact. So you've given them 2 months to do what they have to do. So.
I think whatever investigation they want to conduct, 2 months is more than enough time to round it off. We're not talking about, it's about one money moving from one account to the other. Maybe the one where they China or America, or maybe the one in London. The money moved to a named account. So I guess that should be resolved in no time. So thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, too.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back to take a look at some of your messages in a moment.
The Accountant General had no reasons to reject that request without giving reasons in writing. Okay, so her rejection seems to be this is my personal opinion, is beginning to sound more political. Because in the first place, remember that the minister is not the chief accounting officer of a ministry. Now, the question will be, was it right for her to have been the one to have raised the memo when you had the PAMSEC? And then what advice did she get from the DFA? Especially in this day and time where you now have what they call cash planning, the director of finance of a ministry. Okay. I mean, if you're talking about money, that's the process. Now, what vouchers were raised? What committee meetings were held? What is this supposed to be for? And again, let me say this. It might not, be the right way, but it's conventional. Pay money into the account of a ministry official is not unusual. I'm saying that the proper thing, the proper response should have been, first and foremost, this memo is not properly couched. Because you just don't put it. I've seen that thing flying all over the social media. I haven't seen any backup document. Because usually when you make that kind of request, it is against, this is payment for A, B, C, D, B, E, D, E, and we're not, paying to these people because of A, B, C, D. Committee report A, committee report B, this, and you attach orders to give. But even at that, what the Office of the Accountant General should have done is to respond. Not through the social media to say I'm rejecting it, but to respond in writing, pointing out, those, places or extant, procedures that should have been followed. I didn't see that happen. Now, again, this is a ministry that has been immersed in a lot of struggle, as it were. The new minister comes with her own ideas. The old minister has left, some faithfuls, as it were. So it's also not impossible. I mean, we don't also discountenance the fact that this could be a struggle, for control. Control of maybe things that they don't want let out, or control of the soul and the heart of the program.
Well, just one message from you today. This is from Honorable Ademola Lalade. And the message is, what the president has done in the case of Dr. Betta Edu is the right thing to do. Suspend the minister while investigation is ongoing. If she is found culpable or not, then the president can decide the next line of action. We now have a leader who is proactive. That is a tweet on X. Is that the correct way to put that? But that's it right there from Alalade Ademola. It's a tweet that he has sent in on the program this morning.
Tweet still gives room for, innocent until found guilty. Well, that's not the sentiment you're really getting on social media, is it? Well, we have a number of mails here. What is law without justice is how this one is titled. There cannot be too much accountability. However, what is law without justice? This is from Ayemowa Bamidele. He says, let's not stereotype the allegations raised on the head of the humanitarian ministry or minister, Mrs. Betty Edu. Let us all be patient and see how she responds to the invitation with the EFCC forensic investigating staff on corruption allegations levied against her leadership of the humanitarian and poverty alleviation ministry. Media trials and tweets from different social media apps make it seem like Ms. Betty Edu is low-hanging fruit amongst pack of ministers in the administration used for showcasing the administration position against corruption. I guess it has to start from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, look at this one, Paul. Paul says, if the government investigations and the investigators only concentrate on Dr. Edu's approval, it will be tantamount to cutting the tree branches while the root is left enriched in the soil. In my opinion, all the principal officers of the ministry involved in the process should be questioned and sanctioned. We should not forget their claim that this is how we have been doing it. They only capitalize on the minister's ignorance and possibly lack of extended consultations to perpetrate the embedded bureaucracy corruption. Okay, Thomas Odejide, we also thank you for your messages. So, well, that is the show today. We do thank you all for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Osol. Goodbye.
Quite all right this morning. Thank you for watching. I'm Maokbe Ogun Yusuf. Bye-bye.
And do have a wonderful and productive day. I'm Ayo Makinde.